Enterprise Management 360.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Tech Chat. Now on this week's episode I'm speaking to Spencer Waldron, who is the Director of Global Communications at Prezi. Hi Spencer, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, excited to be here.
So firstly, I think it'd be great if you could explain Prezi Video and what we're using here today.
Yeah, sure. So Prezi Video came out of, we saw more and more people taking their presentations online into, tools like the one that we're using today to talk to each other. And what we noticed is, a lot of the time you'll see somebody talking and there's this nice human connection, but then, your picture disappears very small, and then somebody's presentation will come up on the screen. And what we wanted to do was to make that kind of retaining the human connection. So Prezi Video is this. It's the ability for you and your graphics to be on the screen at the same time, live, like we are today, or if you're doing a pre-recorded video. So that's it in a nutshell.
Excellent. So this is a very useful tool to be using indeed. So a good lead off that then is, what's the current landscape of video communications in the workplace, and really who is using it, and really how are they using it?
Yeah, good question. So I think, obviously video conferencing is the big one. There's a lot of organizations using that, as well as using video, which I'll talk about in a little while. But I think when you look at it, everything comes from this, having, this crazy calendar. And I'm sure you, as well as a lot of people, will recognize that problem. And I think, the more senior you are in a company, the more you'll feel that pain. And when you look at that calendar, there's not a lot of time for deep work or deep thinking. You have to find a way of, okay, how do I kind of get more time in that calendar? And you still need to do lots of meetings, because you need to do these kind of things. You need to kind of give direction and alignment, and find out a lot of information so you can give a lot of good decisions that make the company or organization work well. And I think what we started to see, as this became more and more, is, when you go back in time, things like email were really meant to be the answer to that, to prevent the need to have so many meetings if you just wanted to share information or to give a status update. And I think what you ended up seeing was, as we all know, email can become quite a bit of a time sink, and also interrupt you when you're trying to do that deep work or deep thinking. So what we've seen is that kind of led people to, okay, how can I use video inside an organization to kind of help that problem with the calendar? And I guess it's two things really. It's, how can I reduce meeting length, and how can I remove some of those meetings altogether? And if you look at what type of meetings fit that description, it's a lot of the time when you need to give a status update. So that happens a lot inside companies, or if you just need to transfer information. So for example, we see people where they'll say, okay, I'll record a short video, give it to people in my team, my department, or the whole company. And they get to obviously see that in their own time, but also they can watch it multiple times so they can digest it. And then when you actually have the meeting, that meeting can just be about making a decision and to move forward, or to any questions that were raised during that content.
That's definitely a tool that is needed. I was looking at the calendar there and it looks exactly like mine does today. So I think that's a good plan going forward. Moving on from that, what can you tell me about the findings of Prezi's Future of Video at Work Index, and what does this indicate about people's attitudes towards video communications today?
When you look at the research, there's a lot of human behavior that we'll all recognize. And I think, some of the big things that I pull out of that is, 2/3 of us still find the human connection thing really important. And I think, you see a lot of things, whether that's in a video conference, where if somebody's not got the camera on and they're talking, then it's harder to keep that connection with somebody. So I think having that eye contact, seeing somebody's face, one of the things that we do at Prezi is we have, if one or two people are remote in a video conference, A, everybody's on camera, but B, what we also say is everybody needs to join from a laptop, so you see somebody's face very clearly, because that's when you see the emotion. That's when you see how people react to things. So the human connection is something that we definitely saw from the report that's really important. The other, obvious thing is, having somebody and graphics is more engaging than just somebody talking or just graphics up on the screen. And I'm sure, if I take away myself and you just see this on the screen and I'm just talking, then it's not as engaging as if you see me and my facial expressions as well. And obviously, the other big thing which I thought was interesting is the whole thing around time of day. Because again, what you see is people are more, alert and, creative and ready to do stuff in the morning. And in the afternoon, after they've already done, a lot of that heavy calendar that we were talking about, then obviously there's less kind of creativity and, engagement that people will have. So I think there's a lot of human behavior that we'll all recognize coming out of that report.
Yeah, I think that's a very important element that we're seeing moving forward. Video is becoming such an important interactive element for a lot of people and a lot of customers. So based on those findings, how should organizations cater for employees' preferences moving forward? And what's the future really looking like?
There's a number of things at play here. And I think one of the things I talk a lot about is demographics, because if you look in the next 5 years, I think it's something more than 60% of anybody under the age of 40 will be millennial or Gen Z. And, what we know is these are generations that are more comfortable on video. That's how they like to learn. It's how they like to be entertained. They're very used to being on video. So I think there's a demographics thing that's going to change the face of communications, because that's, a medium that people like. But I think on top of that, it's almost like understanding which meetings are, kind of need a meeting and which ones don't, and other things at play. Because, one of the other things that came out of our piece of research was that actually, if an organization switches to do a lot more video meetings, whether that's conference or asynchronous, then, there's a lot of money to be saved. But if you just say, okay, now we're going to do some, video meetings, then that might not necessarily work unless you actually give people the space and the training and the time to understand, how do they do these two things? How do they reduce the length of meetings and reduce the need for meetings?
Perfect. It's a very exciting time, and I'm interested to see where this goes in the future, and hopefully a lot more companies kind of implement this. So Spencer, thank you so much for coming on this episode of Tech Chat. I really appreciate you talking to us and giving us insight. That's all for now. We'll be back with another episode of Tech Chat next week. In the meantime, make sure you go subscribe to our LinkedIn and Twitter profiles. Also, subscribe to this YouTube channel and head on over to em360tech.com for more great content.